what's going on, you guys? Welcome back to the channel. If you haven't done so yet, make sure you smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, and hit that bell notification button so you're always notified of any new content my channel puts out. You can follow us on Spotify and also on YouTube Podcasts, which is basically YouTube Music. If you see us on Spotify, make sure you follow the channel. And that would do me a lot of good. When I reach a certain point, I gotta start making money off Spotify, but I have to build up the kind of clientele and viewers and listeners for that as well, because it's kind of a new thing that we started. I also have Amazon affiliate, so if there should be links down below. If not, there'll be links later on, and you could pick and choose some of those. And that's another way of supporting the channel. You can also join us over on Patreon and become a member of the channel. Either way, I appreciate everyone who is a Patreon and who is a member of the channel. I appreciate you guys for supporting the channel, so that's awesome. And so, without further ado, let's invite our guest. His name is Siike Donnelly. He is the host of the Venom vlog, and he has some pretty amazing stories that I would like for him to share with us. And I think it's going to be pretty interesting to hear his story. So let's welcome Siike. What's up, man?
Hey, how's it going? Sorry, I muted myself because I was fiddling with things. So yeah, what's up? Thanks for having me on here. I appreciate it.
Yeah, of course, man. So, before we talk about your the Venom vlog, which you guys, if you haven't done so yet, subscribe to the Venom vlog. I kind of want to start back with, so the first day I met you on the vodka stream, and at the time I was working. Well, at the time, Dave started his streams later into the night, and so when I got off work, I was able to get there on like hour 3, right? And usually his streams go for like 3 or 4 hours. So I was like, oh, cool. So halfway through or so, I can jump on. And so I jump on, I'm backstage, and I'm listening to Siike's story, and I missed a lot of it. And I remember thinking, I was like, man, this is an incredible story. I can't believe I'm hearing this. Like, I did not think this guy, who I didn't even know, had this story to tell. And I was like, man, I was very fascinated with it. So, Siike, you are, I guess we'll start with, well, where do you want to start the story off in terms of like,
Well, I mean,
of who you are?
As we'll get into it, obviously, but I guess my story starts in 2010, post brain aneurysm rupture.
So for everyone who doesn't know what a brain aneurysm is, are you able to kind of describe what that is?
I mean, there's different forms of aneurysms, but in my case, they called it like a subarachnoid hemorrhage. It's essentially like a balloon of, that builds in your brain somewhere, in my case, and it can rupture, and if it explodes, it's equivalent of like a grenade going off in your brain. So a lot of cases people do die, but there are people who can survive, like Amelia Clark, who's also a brain aneurysm survivor, and which I don't know how she does it, because even just doing YouTube with one light on me, it like can rattle my head. So I can't imagine being on set with multiple lights and noises.
Oh, yeah.
So, but everyone's different. Everyone reacts, can react differently to it. So, so I came out of an aneurysm and woke up, in a hospital. I was back home. I was with my family, and I had to go through like rehabilitation. I had to do speech therapy, physical therapy, and I have no memories that go prior to the event of the aneurysm. And so literally my story, as we found out, through therapy in the last 2 years, it officially begins there. We thought it began before that, but as we'll get into this, that's where I officially started. So an aneurysm rupture, which is why soon after I created a superhero. I actually reached out to DC, and I wanted to do a Superman story about brain aneurysms, because prior to the aneurysm, I was had broken into comic books, writing and drawing and stuff. And so I was, but I didn't have like a big career. I was like starting it, I was like making waves and making connections. And then after the aneurysm, I was like, all right, well, let me use some of these connections and reach out to people. So it was like some people that worked over at DC at the time, like Dan DiDio and stuff like that, and sending people emails and being like, hey, I'd love to do something with Superman to raise awareness for brain aneurysms. But they were like, well, we can't. At that time, I think they were just starting to do the Horn of Africa stuff that they were doing in like 2011, 2012. So they were like, yeah, we're already working on something. So unfortunately, we can't do both, just based on, I don't know, whatever the higher ups, allow them to do. So we changed the character to Soul Star, and then I reached out and we got 150 different artists, including Kevin Eastman and a bunch of other Sean Cheeks Galloway and a
Wow.
bunch of amazing names that some you've heard of, some you haven't. And we put together a comic book graphic novel to release on Kickstarter to raise awareness for for brain aneurysm. So
That's awesome, man.
it kind of became like a mini mission of mine. And I don't know, in many ways I feel like I kind of there were some successes I had at it and more failures. And I think that's more or less like me just trying to jump back into a life that I didn't really understand, at the
Mhm.
time. I was trying to
Right.
pick up the pieces where I left off, and as we found out, there weren't any pieces where I left off.
Well, and
So
so that's the thing too, is that I mean, do you you don't really have any recollection of like the moment it happened?
yeah, no, I mean, I know the story. Like so because I don't like store visual memories either, I just have knowledge of stuff. So I can remember it is what people tell me.
Mhm.
But that's it. Like there's no like emotional connection to things I repeat to
It's
you.
like someone telling you a story about somebody else, but that somebody
Right.
else is actually you.
Exactly. So apparently I was at dinner with friends and I was complaining about a migraine, and this happened a lot because I've grown up from what I hear with migraines. And I guess we were at dinner, and at dinner I started talk like I was saying like I got to go outside for air or something, or however my friend said it, and he said, I assume that's what you're saying because you weren't making any sense. And he's like, and then you got up and you started walking towards the exit, and right at the exit you just hit the ground.
Oh my god.
And he said, and luckily you were rushed to the hospital, and the nurse knew what was going on, and they immediately started treating you for a ruptured aneurysm, and probably because of that saved my life. And from there, like, yeah, so I have like some nerve damage in my left side because I had like a
Mhm.
mild stroke with it, and so there's been some things that I've had to push through over the years, and but yeah, I
Wow.
try. At first, I was like, all right, this happened to me. I didn't realize it was like a spectacular thing to some level, and I
Mhm.
met other aneurysm survivors, some who were doing worse than me and some who were doing even better than me. um but it like I at first I was kind of like, oh well, I think the only person I told was at Comic-Con. I was just like, I was so it was neat to go to Comic-Con like a year and a half later, um and say like, hey, Brightest Day was like a big deal to me because it was a comic book about people getting second chances. And the
Right.
way everything was explained to me, like through my mom and stuff, was like, you're getting a second chance, and so
Right. No, definitely, definitely.
yeah, so I was like, oh well, this book is cooler than to me now because that's what it seems like it's about. And so I started diving back into comics, and then my brother watched a lot of movies with me, and some of my friends watched a lot of movies with me, hoping to jog memories. Like my brother, I guess me and him grew up watching a lot of comedies like Tommy Boy and Animal House and House Party. And so his role was like, well, let's watch some of these comedies again, see if it jogs any memories. And unfortunately they didn't, but I very quickly caught up on the stuff that I used to be into. And it was
Mhm.
neat forming new opinions on everything because there would be some things where I'm like, I don't really like this. And my brother's like, this was one of your favorite movies. So just so my life had kind of completely changed, and affected the people that knew me the most, I would say, because it was a bigger shock to some of them, um, to see me different, talk different, walk different, stuff
Wow.
like that. So
And
yeah.
having no recollection of any events that happened before you're 28, before the aneurysm.
Yeah, none. I mean, I have like the weirdest thing of all things is I used to work on movie sets too. So like I worked on like the first Iron Man and the second Iron Man.
Oh
Um,
wow.
and I was like a PA, like a production assistant and stuff. And and so there was, or like not officially for those movies, but they shot some of those movies at different studios because this was before Disney bought them.
Right.
So like I worked at those studios, like at Sony. So like I would help out, if they needed an extra hand and stuff. So it'd just be like for a scene or two. So luckily I kept detailed journals. Like I guess having that life of going into comics and movies was so cool to me. It was like a dream of mine, I guess, from a kid up to then. So
Right.
I was keeping these journals, and I would take pictures of things that were safe to take pictures of. And this was before, I mean, I guess this was might have been before phones had cameras on them. But or around the time where they started getting a little bit better
Yeah.
quality. But I was taking Polaroids, and I would put them in these journals. So that was one of the things, that I went through coming out of the aneurysm was all these journals. I was like flipping through them and just kind of learning about my life and stuff. So again, I have knowledge of these things, but I don't
Right.
have I can't tell you how I felt on the day that I was on the Iron Man 1 movie set or anything, you know.
That's crazy. Now, how did you find these journals? Was it brought to your attention, or did you kind of stumble upon these? Like, oh shit.
No, luckily, because I had a place in California and I was back home visiting, so a lot of stuff was kind of stored for me because they were like, "Well, we hope Seek comes back to California," and then some things were at my mom's house, like just in bins. So luckily, it was like a combination of the two, where I had some journals for like I guess I lived here in Florida and moved out to California, and the stuff I had here, some was left at my aunt's house, some went back to my mom's house, and then some stuff was just abandoned in California that luckily my roommates at the time put into the garage until I came back. So it was like piecing together this life almost
That's
afterwards.
crazy. So even when you did come back, I
Mhm.
mean, it you weren't the same person because you had
Yeah.
no recollection of anything. So you're just like, hey, how's it going?
Yes, I went on a lot of faith. Like I think one of my favorite characters around that time became, like the kind of the Blue Lantern Corps a little bit
Hmm.
because they had like this almost faith-based thing where it's like I had to take people at their word they were my friends. Uh, so there was a lot of that at first where I'm just kind of like, well, all right, well, I've written about you and and I lived with you. so like yeah, I guess we're friends, so let's I'll continue to be your friend and I'll just try to be as normal as I can and not make it
Now,
weird.
these journals that you're talking about, I mean,
Mm.
how in depth are they? Are they just kind of just some notes here and there, or was it like a
They're,
full on like diary type journal with pictures?
yeah, they're all over the place. Like some are incomplete, some have dates, some don't. Like
Hmm.
some are vague, some aren't. So like it's they weren't like perfect, but it's also like one of those weird things where it's like how awesome, I guess, in a way that I would wake up one day without memories and then have a bunch stored somewhere. Like
it's like
it's like
how
the
often
way
would
that
somebody
worked out.
have that?
Yeah, and
Yeah.
that's it's almost like yeah, it's weird. It's one of those like again it kind of rocked our world. Like my mom was just like, I never understood why you kept this stuff, and now I'm glad I didn't. None of it got destroyed or thrown away. Um,
Seriously, I mean
yeah,
that's now. How long were you in the hospital for once you had the aneurysm?
a while because I was in a medically induced coma for like a week, and then
Wow.
after that, just kind of climbing back up. Um, I would say probably like I don't know, maybe a couple weeks, but then I went to my mom's house. Well, she was living with her boyfriend at the time, so that stuff kind of gets complicated. Some of my personal history with my mom
Right.
and stuff, but like
Yeah.
but at that time, like it was yeah, I was like in a wheelchair, like just hanging back at home, and then like um going through PT and stuff, and then catching up with like people who knew me, like back in South Carolina, and at that point I was like back to being more mobile again and my, and stuff like that. So it's kind of yeah, I was like say in the hospital maybe like not too longer after that once they were able to release me, but only on the condition that I, um work on stuff at home too and then go to my PT meetings and things. So yeah, not too long, but I remember a while like I remember sitting in that hospital for at least a week and a half, I think.
Wow.
Um,
And
like not I
so
don't remember, but I know the knowledge that of the date to the date, or whatever. So
right.
yeah.
So upon coming out of the hospital,
Mhm.
you go home and people come to see you and visit you who know you
Mhm.
and you literally don't know who they are. You're just like, "Hi, how's it going?"
Yeah, and luckily some people I think were kind of pre-talked to, like, hey, he might not know who you are. Um, we're kind of easy. We don't want to overwhelm them. We're kind of
Right, right, right.
easing them in. So I think people kind of took that to heart and were like, okay, well then we'll just treat them like normal and like we normally would seek. And that's kind of how that was, where it was like people just came up and talked to me like we had like we had a conversation that we didn't finish, before. Um, and so there was a lot of like, okay, let me just take this in. Like I didn't get references. Like I think the other day we were on a podcast together and I had said something like Star Wars. Like I didn't have any memories of the 3 Star Wars movie or the original Star Wars movies, and you're like, "What?"
Oh yeah, yeah. I was
Yeah,
like, what?
and that's what my friend reacted to. He was like, "What?" And so he's like, "Movie night," and
I
he's
mean,
like,
I would imagine
"Yeah,
since the age of 28, movie night is probably the most epic night of you
yeah,
could have. I mean, you can literally relive watching the original trilogy all over again, watching Lord of the Rings all over again.
yeah."
There
I
had to
did
been
all
those
that.
moments where you were like, "Wow, this is a really great story," knowing that you probably had already seen it, you just don't remember anything about it.
Yeah, and like, and even at that time, like, because I knew I was like, okay, well, these are my friends. They're all into movies. They're all into comic books and stuff like that. So clearly, this is these are my people, and this is the stuff I'm into. So I
Hmm.
kept gravitating towards that stuff. Like, all right, I'll just keep sticking to this. Um,
Right.
so yeah, that was kind of it eased it into the nerd world again, and where I was like, I didn't feel lost as I probably would have, if I didn't have such a strong foundation in these worlds. So rewatching them, I guess, was neat for my friends because they were just like, I can't wait to see like what parts he likes, what parts he does, like
Yeah. Right.
compared to before, and for some of my friends who knew me better, or like my brother, like I said, we'll watch like Tommy Boy, and I might not laugh at something that I used to laugh at all the time before, but laugh at a
That's
different
right.
part,
You
you
did
know?
touch on that on Dave's stream. You said, yeah, it was a part that you didn't laugh at, and he said, really? He was like, You used to love this scene or something."
Yeah.
You were like, "Oh, okay. Well,
Yeah,
it's good to
exactly. And
hear."
I just like, oh, okay. And then, but there was a lot of like, oh, am I doing something wrong? Like I had
Well,
that
yeah, 'cause it
reaction.
has to feel uncomfortable because you're like,
Yeah,
"Oh,
because
am I
yeah,
letting you down? I'm sorry, I don't know."
yeah, and that's how I felt a lot of times, like where I just started feeling like I was like, man, I feel like I'm every time I do something, I'm disappointing somebody.
Yeah, and that's got to be really hard to kind of deal with. Um,
Sorry, I
I would
wasn't taking
imagine.
out on you.
I know
I
you're
have
like,
I have a
"Quick."
dog who's very sick, so I'm like trying
Oh,
to keep
okay.
an eye on him too.
Sorry about that.
Yeah, it's okay.
Um, so I would imagine, you know, therapy and all that would help with kind of coping with the idea that, you're not letting people down. It's just a change that they're not used to.
I mean, it's yeah, because well, at first we didn't. If we only knew what we know now, um,
Right.
we probably those early therapy sessions, some of the other stuff would have gone way differently. Um, but anyway, at the time though, it was kind of like, yeah, it was there was a little bit of that, but it was just kind of I had to learn to just be,
Hmm.
like okay, if someone has a reaction and it makes me feel like negative or I'm doing something wrong, just try to separate yourself from that feeling because you're not doing anything wrong. They're it's on them, like they're just reacting because
Right.
of a preconceived like who they knew before kind of thing.
Right. Okay.
So it took me a while, but eventually I got to a point where I'm like, okay, I'm not it's not don't take everything, like they always say, like in business, like don't take everything so personal, right? Like the 4 rules of business or whatever. Like be impeccable with your words, don't take things personally. So
Right.
it's
Right.
like that kind of stuff, and a lot of that I learned from not to name drop, but this part of my I would consider part of my rehabilitation at some point was creating a podcast, or a friend already having a podcast and reaching out to me to be his co-host, um, back in like 2012 when the New 52 started, and then from there being on Dan Harmon's podcast a bunch of times, which I used to just go in attendance of for Harmontown. I would just go and watch, and I found Dan deeply fascinating because unlike a lot of people around me, Dan felt very open. Like he didn't hide anything. Like if he said something that was embarrassing, he said it. Whereas I'm like, oh, I feel like I'm not used to this. I feel like everyone kind of tiptoes around me and they're too afraid to say something that might make them feel embarrassed or something. And Dan was this guy that just kind of constantly would share things that he would be like, dude, that's embarrassing. Why are you saying this? But that's who he was. And I
Right.
found that very refreshing. And so I met him and started talking to him off podcast. And eventually he was like, you should come on the podcast. And I think it took him like 60 episodes before he finally convinced me. But he was like you, like he was just like, this story is wild. And I want to talk about it. I just find it, he found it, fascinating. Um,
Yeah.
so,
And
doing that helped, me kind of
oh
get more
yeah.
comfortable with it.
Well,
Yeah.
I find it fascinating in that it's an experience that not many people either experience themselves or even know of. that somebody can go through something like this. And so, when I heard some of the story, I thought, man, this is I could not imagine waking up one day and wondering, like, I mean, when you came out of your aneurysm, I mean, did you have any idea who you even were, or were you just a being that was there and wondering, okay, so what do I do now?
I mean, yeah, I don't think I had any thoughts. It was more like a, "Whoa, where am I?" Kinda, like,
Hmm.
what am I supposed to be doing?" Like, I think I feel like I had, like, natural, like, "Oh, okay, I know I need to, like, breathe and drink water," like, I
Right.
like, things felt natural to me, like, where I'm like, "Oh, I'm thirsty," So there was, like, a basic level of something I feel like I had, but I couldn't pinpoint myself in place, like, I didn't know where and when I was, how much, if time had passed or anything, like, so I just felt like there was a sense of lost, and I talked about that a lot. Like my first couple of years, I felt really lost, and also
Well,
I felt
yeah.
like I felt like this, like, wick was lit, and that there was still gonna be there was gonna be an end.
Hmm.
Like we, at first we were like, okay, well, we got to see how you react to, after this aneurysm, years later, we want to see. I ended up developing another aneurysm, and we had to get that coiled. So it was like
Wow.
the battle never ended. It's like Superman, the never ending battle. And so, like, and so I got to a point where I just started being uncomfortable. Like, I'm just like, well, this wick is eventually, it's been lit, it's eventually going to reach the bomb, and I'm going to go away. And that just felt like it was taking forever. And then it started to create a depression in me, because
Yeah.
I was like, oh, I thought I was only back and it was temporary. I didn't realize I was in it for the long haul again, and that I would have to struggle so much. And then I started feeling like even though I was talking to some other aneurysm survivors, I still felt disconnected. Like like everyone gets like that, where they feel they have no one to talk to, but they turns
Hmm.
out they have a lot of people they can talk to. And
Right.
eventually I figured that out, like, oh, why am I being so dumb? I can talk to this person, this person, this person, and then eventually, okay, I can pay a professional and talk to them too if I feel like I want to share something else. So yeah, and so I eventually got comfortable in my skin, and I would say there was a big shift in my demeanor and personality. There was a little bit more anger and frustration and depression from like 2010 to 2016, and I would say from like 2017 onward, I've kind of mellowed into the person I've currently become, and I feel very comfortable now. Like, I'm like, nothing. I try not to let things overwhelm me, and even with some of the news I've gotten in the last few years about my current diagnosis and stuff, and a lot of stuff that's really been going on, it's kind of like I kind of take it in strides. It was hard at first,
Hmm.
but the pill was it was easier to swallow than I feel like it is for a lot of people. So yeah.
Wow. I mean, that's oh my gosh. And not only that, though, but you had mentioned earlier when we were talking backstage about you started to experience time lapses or time you're missing chunks of time.
Yes. Yeah.
Can you
Yeah.
talk
Like
to us about that a little bit?
sure. So during the, when I was depressed and everything, there was a really dark point at one, at a certain point, and I felt like I was like, I need to get out. I need to get out of this life. And luckily I didn't. But soon afterwards, things started happening where, like, I was missing, like, time. Like, and normally that's hard to figure out, by the way.
Right.
But because I'm so routine based, post aneurysm, I had to get a routine down. I got a service dog, named Echo, who sadly passed a couple years ago, but at that time he helped me build a routine, a daily routine. So it's like, okay, I eat at the same time every day, or roughly. I walk.
Yeah.
Everything was like to the minute almost. So then it so then it got to a point where I actually started noticing, like, wait a minute, well, I didn't do this. Why didn't I do this at this time? Or why don't I remember this time,
Hmm.
of doing something like that? And it took a while, but eventually I got there. And then also with roommates and stuff, like, they would be like, they would point out, like, oh, earlier we were talking about this, and I'm like, we weren't talking about that. What are you talking about? And it would slowly piecing things together. And so I started bringing this up and going, like, what's wrong? Like, am I is my memory going? And so, there's a lot of tests you go through to try to diagnose things like this. The first ones would we or like the first semi conclusion that was reached was that I could possibly be experiencing early onset dementia, because they were like, everyone was focused on the aneurysm stuff. No one
Right.
was really
That's
looking at
scary too. Yeah.
yeah, no one was really looking at like psychological stuff. So we were kind of, I mean, like they were, but they weren't. And so we was like, this seems to make sense with the amount of struggles he's had and the stuff he's going through. This seems to make sense where he might have some kind of early onset dementia. So this is what we're going to keep an eye on and focus on. So it was recommended that I get like a dry erase board, and it's like, oh, just keep some notes, and then on your phone, keep a few notes. Um, and so that's what I was doing. And for a while, like, I mean, I left California kind of with that diagnosis, came here during COVID to Florida, and here started keeping those board, that board, and then one board turned to two boards because I realized, oh, I'm going to need other things. I need a board I can pin notes to and receipts to, because now I'm not even remember buying stuff. Like, so what's that about, or why would I buy this? Like, I don't normally eat this, so like, what's going on there? And eventually, what we discovered was after the big clincher for us was when Echo passed, because even for me, it's like, I know, I love my mom, I love my brother, and I have family and friends, but no one stuck with me every day,
Right.
except Echo. He was probably the closest thing I had to like a real family member who was just with me all the time. And so when he passed, it was sudden. Like, I came home from work and found him under our bed, and it destroyed me, absolutely destroyed me. And the grief was so much and hurt so much that it shook loose something that was already wrong, or, well, not wrong, but I'm not supposed to use that word, but something that was already occurring to us, which was, it wasn't early onset dementia, that there was something else going on. And so it rocked us. And so I stopped eating. My routine fell apart. I stopped walking, because I mean, I was walking, but I had no dog to walk. So I was just kind of going through the motions of doing things, but I wasn't eating, and I was shutting down, and I was in a bad place. And then I started noticing, like, wow, I'm missing 2 days and 3 days. And now I missed a whole week that I couldn't remember. And then I started seeing things on the boards that I didn't write in different handwriting. And I'm like, okay, now I'm freaking out. I thought I was going crazy. And so I try to take the steps to commit myself, because I'm like, because I don't want to get into personal things, but there's a family history of some struggles mentally. So I was worried that I was like, maybe there's something wrong with me that I need to go examine right now. And luckily, that was step one of discovering what was really going on, which is us. Although I don't know the full details of it, I just know, so I have some knowledge of like stories my mom told me and stuff. But apparently, I went through a series of horrible things as a kid that severely traumatized me
Right.
around the ages of 7 and 8. And what that ended up creating was a scenario that most people would used to diagnose as multiple personality disorder, but nowadays it's called DID. But my subset of it, or my current diagnosis, we're still trying to figure out if I have full DID or not. But they categorize me as OSDD1A, where it's a little bit more subtle. I have alters, and I myself am an alter. So the reason I don't have any memories prior to 2010, before 28 years old, is because literally post aneurysm, I was summoned or created or awakened. So I was born at post aneurysm, and so and that's kind of that's why my story starts there. I'm not the person who I was before the aneurysm with no memories. I'm a response to the pain and trauma that our body experienced from the aneurysm. And my purpose, or my goal, is a rebuilding. I have like a rebuilding, and like I want to help. So I like, to a fault, but like I want to help, I want to rebuild. And that's kind of my function in our system. And we're all shades of Siike, but with different life experiences and everything. So my function is to help, which is why I try at work to be so helpful, why I like to be of service. I like customer service stuff. And that's why working in comics always felt weird to me, because I'm like, I was kind of completing the dream of the previous guy. And really I'm just like a 9 to 5 customer service person. Like that's that's probably my zone that I should be in. So because of that, I don't know. I'm going off because I'm like watching my dog and he's doing something I don't like right now, and I'm like, so I'm trying to like focus on the story. So I
I'm
apologize.
sorry. Is your dog is he okay or?
He's fine. He's just like sometimes he chews his foot, and I it drives me nuts.
Oh,
And
okay.
so he's chewing on his foot right now, and I want to tell him to stop, but
Well, you can if you need to. Just say, hey, you just do what you gotta do.
okay, that's cool. Yeah, I will in a second. So anyway, to answer your question though, but that's I think I'm answering your question. I actually
Yeah.
forgot. But that's the mode I've been in is after learning this has been like, okay, we got to take this in strides because it was too overwhelming. And to know that I that one of my like one of the other alters has been with me the whole time post aneurysm and has just been subtle about his appearance. He like not wanting people to know that he existed. Um, and then they were like, yeah, that's more common. Like that's more common, and why it's so hard to diagnose because it's like a thing that when people go through, there isn't a want to show it off,
Well,
because
yeah,
there's a
yeah, yeah.
stigma. There's a lot of stigma with
Hmm.
it, and since Green is older, he goes back pre-aneurysm. He's apparently the first alter from when we were a kid, so his knowledge base goes back further even, and so he's had a different life experience than I have, and which is why he stayed quiet most of the time. And plus, he's also apparently the one that he knows what really happened to us as a kid. So he's extra guarded. He doesn't like to let his presence really be known. So it's we've learned a lot about the brain just from aneurysm stuff, but then to throw this into it as well has really kind of rocked our world and overwhelmed us a lot of times. So that's why I have to take like mental naps. I'm like, I need time out because some days it's frustrating and it's overwhelming. And it's not easy. Like, so we had one dry erase board and one cork board. Now we have a whole wall of boards. Everyone has their own boards, so we can communicate because
So,
there's a barrier between us. So like, I don't know what they do during the day when they're fronting, and they don't know what I do. So
so
so we
how
have to
many
keep.
alters are there total?
Currently, we know of five. Um,
Wow.
and it's including me, and then four others, as far as we know. But like I said, everyone has a function, so it's not like they all come out all the time. Everyone has like a role to play that gets us, you know, through the day essentially, or through the month or year. They come in when they're needed, um, and so that's why we kind of fall in the, I guess, the OSTD 1A categories, because everyone's kind of a version of Seek. They're just a little different. So our like speech patterns might be a little different, um, or like our posture is different, things like that. So
And so when you talk about these different alters, it's almost like, if you take somebody um who doesn't have what you have, the
mm,
ability you have, it's almost like those alters live within each and every person, but yours are so pronounced that they actually express themselves by literally becoming you, taking over and actually coming all the way to the surface. Well, I think so. It feels like a lot of people have these other personalities that, but they're kind of deep down inside, and they just kind of it helps them enduring different things and different situations and how they process things. But to know that you have an alter that will come out and just be you for extended period of time. I mean, it's so fascinating to know that like that exists and that's a reality. Do they have names?
yeah, they do, but we mainly refer to them as colors right now.
Okay.
That's, I guess, that's how I perceive them. And so there's green, blue, and I would fade has kind of a red, like, connotation to them. So yeah, they're kind of color based, but they have names. Yeah,
Wow.
especially green, because green apparently went by that name for a while too. So, and he had like a landscaping job, so he like knows like a lot more Spanish than I know. So there's like things like that, which is why like I didn't watch Moon Knight when it first came out, and I'm a comic book fan, but I have like a Moon Knight's one of those like blind spots for me as a comic fan. I'm kind of like, oh yeah, I've always heard him be described as Marvel's Batman, and I kind of just dismissed it as that. But like for me, like the show, Blue watched the show. Like he ended up watching the show, and so he was trying to get me to watch it, and he was like talking about it in therapy, and then also like posting on my Instagram about it, like this show's amazing, like hoping I would go watch it. And finally I did, like on the last week of when the final episode aired, I binged the whole thing and watched it. And I see why he wanted me to watch it, because like there was literally things in that show that like mirror our life, big time. Which if you don't mind, I just need to pause for a second here, and I'll come right back. And I'm so sorry. I
No,
need to
no, no. Go right
check
ahead.
on Ace.
Yeah,
But
go
I'll be
right
right
ahead.
back. Yeah, sorry.
That's okay. And so, guys, if you haven't done so yet, make sure you subscribe to the channel, smash the like button, and hit that bell notification button so you're always notified of any new content the channel puts out. Uh, Also, follow us on Spotify. Leave a rating, leave a comment. I appreciate everyone who does follow us on Spotify. I'm trying to grow that audience each and every podcast that I have. And also, we are also available on YouTube Music as well under YouTube Podcasts. So definitely check that out. Also, consider supporting the channel on Patreon or becoming a member of the channel. Um, but man, this.
Yeah, sorry. And I know I didn't mean to leave at such a pivotal point, but like
No, it's fine. It's fine. I understand.
Ace is so we Blue rescued Ace. He was like, look, Seek needs his routine back. So he thought by getting another dog it would help. And I his heart was in the right place. But Ace is he's an older dog, and he was going to be sent to a kill shelter. So he's got a lot of issues too. So so we just went to the vet a couple days ago, and I'm just keeping an eye on him. So he has just like he's going through a lot right now. So thanks for letting me break away for a second. I'm
Yeah.
so sorry.
So when was the first time that one of your alters like reached out to you in terms of like trying to communicate with you? Because I mean, are you a color to somebody else, or are you like the
Yeah.
primary?
No, I'm orange. So
You're
yeah.
orange.
Hmm. Yeah.
And so when did one of your alters finally reach out to you to try to communicate to you, and you realized, wait a minute, like obviously you said, I didn't write that. What's going on? And then at what
Yeah.
point did one of them reach out to you and like trying to ask you a question on the board where you're like, wait a minute, I didn't write that, and it's
Yeah,
addressed to myself?
it wasn't a question. It was a we need to talk kind of thing. And there's nothing, I can't tell you how scary that was, because that's why I was like, I need to go commit myself. Like there's something,
Yeah.
I'm a crazy person. And that's how I felt at first. And it took some convincing, major convince. And sometimes I'm still not sure. But I've had coworker, like other people have met the alters now. Like before it was like,
Oh wow.
we're gonna hide out, like Green's mission was like, I don't want anyone to know anything's wrong. um Probably, like I said, because of past experiences he had with like our original. So like, so he never really came out, but now when he comes out, he's distinct. And so he like, my friend was like, there was a time where we were hurting for money, like really bad, like we were in a bad spot. Like Ace is very expensive, more than our previous dog Echo. Like Ace has a lot of medical things we're trying to stay on top of. So there's a month where it's like, okay, I can pay for this and this and this and rent and just eat peanut butter and jelly for like 2 weeks,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm not going to be able to pay this bill. So my friend Nate would be like, all right, well, here, I'll let you borrow some money. You can pay me back. And I get an emotional reaction, because it's very kind of somebody to do that, like to
Right.
let you borrow money, that's like $500 to $600, and give you time to pay it back. It's very kind gesture. And so I get overwhelmed. I'm like, dude, you don't need to do this. And I get emotional, and sometimes I'll cry, and just because I'm like, I feel so terrible. I can't
Right.
support myself and this animal, and who's my buddy now. Like, even though I know Blue rescued him, but like he's different around all of us. Like he sleeps differently with each of us. So
Wow. It's like
like
he
as
knows.
yeah, he knows. Yeah, exactly. And so like Nate was like, he wrote, he was in the car, I guess, with Green, and Green, you know, so he was like talking to Green, and Green wasn't responding. And then Nate was just like, sorry, hang on. I gave him a bone to chew on, and he was just like spitting it up a little. I'm sorry. So anyway, so Ace, or Nate, he asked like Green some questions, and he realized, like, wait a minute. And he's like, who are you? And because he's like, the way this is, saying what Nate told me. Nate was like, your posture was different. The way you sat in my car, you had your foot up. Like, he's like, you never put like your feet up. Like, he's like, like, the thing is, I'm predictable. Like, I'm a routine guy. So like, if I go to work, I'm the same at work. Like my recently, Blue worked an entire day. Blue is very smart. Like, he's I would say he's the smart part of us, in the sense that he's a fast learner. I'm not a very fast learner. I can learn things, but I got to do it a lot. I got to commit it to, because I don't have a visual memory. I got to commit things to muscle memory a lot. I got to train my fingers and hands to just know where to go. And but Blue learns really quickly. He adapts fast, to the point where he even calls himself a coping mechanism. He doesn't even say he's an alter. He refers to himself as a coping mechanism. He's just like, oh, I'm just a reaction that this brain is having. Like, that's how hyper aware he is of things. So he's like our hyper awareness and our ability to learn fast. Like, he's productive, like very productive. So he worked for me an entire, he watched, someone do something next to him and figured it out. I mean, the job I have is not a hard job. But he figured it out enough to get through a shift. And my supervisor was like, okay, like, and same with Nate in the car. Nate was like, dude, he's like, I've had so many conversations with you about movies, about other things, and you give like these long-winded answers like I'm doing here. He's like, you talk in paragraphs, is what the people tell me. He goes, Green was totally different. I gave him a check, no emotional reaction. And he's like, and then he gave it back to me and said, save it for Siike when he comes back. And he goes, and then 3 hours later, I gave you that check and you cried. And he was like, for my friend Nate, he was like, that was wild. He's like, you had a non-emotional reaction, and then you had the reaction I expected you to have. And then like at work, my boss was like, you greet every customer the same. You say the same dumb dad jokes to every customer. He's like, you do the same thing. You're a routine. You are predictable.
Mm-hmm.
She goes, but when Blue was here, he greeted every customer differently. Didn't really make jokes. He was, but he was still funny, but like a different kind of funny. She described him. So hearing other people say this stuff, like, I'll write those notes down. I'll bring them to therapy, and I'll bring them up when I have a session to talk. So like, so yeah, it's like, for other people who know me and are around me, it's a big deal for them, because they're like, dude, I like, for example, like I'm 5'9", but I have shoulder pain. I have some neck pain. Like I said, I have some nerve damage. My pain threshold is pretty low. If I get sick, I get a runny nose. I'm kind of a miserable mess. But Green has a very high pain tolerance. And so since he doesn't feel some of my lower back pain or my shoulder pain, turns out we hunch more than we thought. So we're actually 5'11". So like, when they had to go to the DMV and update our driver's license, everything, and so they take the driver's test and everything, and he stood against the wall, and so our driver's license is 5'11", and I was like, wait, I'm 5'9". So at therapy, we actually did a measuring thing where we measured each of us. I'm 5'9", Blue's 5'10", and Green's 5'11".
And it's all based on posture.
And it's all based on posture. And I'm like, holy crap. And I'm like, well, that makes sense, because my brother's tall. He's like 6'1", and my grandfather's tall. And like, so I'm like, I was wondering, I'm like, 5'9" is pretty average. Like, and I know that happens sometimes, but I was like, that's wild. I'm actually 5'11". So, and it's all based on posture. And like how he sets our jaw. Like, so Green has like a very, like, he squares off our jaw. And like, whereas I have like a big overbite, he'll like, I guess, like, force it to be locked, to give him like a stronger line. So, I mean, it's just things like that. So it's like, that's other people's experiences that I'm relaying to you.
Wow, that's incredible. Now, you mentioned earlier backstage that that's why. Well, you also on the show too that Moon Knight was a show that you really connected with, and you're like, man, this is really cool, because even in Moon Knight, he has moments where something traumatic is happening in front of him, and then boom, all of a sudden he's somebody else, and then he goes into action, and then when he comes to, he's like, wait, what are we doing? And he has to kind of figure out where he's at. And do you have those moments where all of a sudden Siike comes back and you're like, wait, where am I? What are we doing? Like, how did I get here?
Oh yeah. I mean, like I said, that's where It's so once it's so after Echo passed, like I said, the grief, it rocked it was like earthquakes to our system. So like
Yeah.
it was like things became way more noticeable. And you say the first time someone reached out to communicate with me, so when I was like, okay, I'm crazy, I've gone crazy and I'm losing my mind, there was a suicide attempt, and and green stopped us. So like I would say I would consider that the first time that I felt communicated with, where it was like there was like a force shutdown of my identity because I was causing our body so much pain. And he stepped forward and was like, no, 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 we're not doing this. Um, so yeah, so like Moon Knight, what I connected to on that show and why Blue, I think, wanted me to watch it was because at that time I was working for Harley Davidson, and I'd been working there a while, like through COVID, and I was, did really well at trying to make sure we hit sales, even when we only had one or two customers, in the span of a day, and I was doing my best, and I got to a point where they were hiring for like an assistant manager position, and I had been assistant manager at Lego for a couple years, um, prior to lifting my life and moving here to Florida, and so I was like, oh, I have manager experience. I'm doing good here at the store. I'm great with guests. Like, I feel like I'd be a shoe-in for that, position, but there are other great people. So, I'll try and I'll do the interview. And this happened. Then Echo passed, and then I was a mess, but I still had to go in like a week and a half later and do the interview.
Oh my
Um,
gosh.
and I was like, oh my God, I'm not ready for this. I'm a mess. So in the interview, I was like trying not to be emotional and just kind of like telling them what my plan would be for the store as like a leader, and everything. And I didn't get the position. They gave it to someone who was very nice, but I obviously feel like wasn't right for the position. That's my bias because I'm looking out for me. Um, but what ended up happening is because of that, then my diagnosis, I started getting treated differently, um, and 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 not by everybody. Obviously, some people were really cool and nice about everything, but things got really dark and got really bad, and so. Um, oh man, I'm so sorry. I kind of trailed off. Your question
Well, we started talking
originally?
about Moon Knight.
Oh yeah, so
And
Moon Knight. Yeah, so in Moon Knight, Steven is a the show does a really great job of like introducing you through Steven, who
Mhm.
is not the what you would describe as the core personality of that system, right? So he's an alter. And I thought that was really clever to do the show that way. And I understand why now Blue wanted me to see it, because when I was told that I was most likely an alter, um, that devastated me. I imagine it's like when
Yeah.
in comic book form, like when Peter Parker found out he was the clone, you're just like, wait, the last how many years of my life? Like there's you're like, am I not real? Like there's like this, like, so I mean, I can only compare things to comics because I don't have any real, I knew all I knew about this condition prior to like being diagnosed with it was probably like Fight Club, and like Sybil. So I'm not like I was scared when they diagnosed me because I'm like, this is terrifying. Do I have like, is there someone evil inside me?
Mhm.
Like you go through all those things, like all those thoughts. Um, and we don't, luckily. It's like, no, it's not like the movies. It's not like Split. It's not like these other things. Like
Yeah.
it's,
That's
those are,
extreme.
yeah, they're the exaggerated movie versions of those. But what I liked
Yeah.
about Moon Knight was that at least the DID stuff felt like what I was learning about in
Mhm.
therapy. It felt like it mirrored it. So like Steven being an alter who worked a menial job at a museum, and where his supervisor was like, there's no way I'm going to promote you to tour guide. Like you have no shot at that because you're late and you're a mess and you're, all these things. And,
Yeah, right.
like, so I immediately was like, this is why Blue wanted me to watch this, because he wanted me to know that it's okay to be Steven, like it's okay to like, you get to the fifth episode and you realize Steven's an alter and that Mark's the real one, which, yeah, if you're a comic book fan, you probably knew that. But for non-comic book fans, it was such a neat way to delve into the concept of DID, where by the time Steven quote unquote dies in episode 5, you feel for him. You're like, no, he can't die. It's Steven. He's like the nice plucky one,
Yeah, yeah,
like
yeah.
you fell in love with the guy. And seeing that like portrayed out on the show, like I think helped me kind of understand, like, okay, like this this did rock my world, but I still have a purpose. I still, my goal is still to be of service, and so we need to still find a way where I could be of service to
Mm-hmm.
the rest of our system, and play my role that I'm supposed to play, that that the others are incapable of doing. And so we all bring something to the table. And so Moon Knight helped me just kind of digest, as critical as I am of the show as a superhero show, as a portrayal of, you know, DID, it's definitely one of the better ones out in media. And it made me not feel like such a, it helped me not feel crazy, I guess, is
Mm-hmm.
the right way, even though we don't use that word. But yeah.
Yeah, no, yeah, and
So yeah, so I became a fan because this is a lot of this is Blue. Like Blue got a lot of this stuff. Like
oh wow,
he was like, I want Moon Knight stuff like everywhere. And I'm like, okay. So I said, you know what, I'll give in. I got rid of a lot of Venom stuff, sold things, and then helped pay for some of this. My friend Nate paid for some of this. We were going to do a Moon Knight podcast at one point. I think we still might at some point. Um, but that way I can talk more about my diagnosis and talk about the character. So yeah, so that's our plan, and that's why this is essentially the backdrop for that show. But right now it's like Blue keeps moving things around, as I was telling you earlier, so I have to constantly adjust my lighting, and that's why I'm not happy with the way this looks right now. I'm like, no, I want to do it. I want a different light source, and but the more he moves stuff around, the more I have to like adjust. So
so it
yeah.
sounds like you're at a point too where if Blue does something, instead of saying what's this, no, I'm putting this back, you sort of let Blue do what his role is, and you kind of work with that
Like the way I
for the most part.
see things is like I I tried to give up on life, you
Mm-hmm.
know, um, and and I feel like Blue is like, even though he calls himself, you know, a coping mechanism and stuff, like I gave him my old Instagram account, and he posts on it sometimes. He changed it to Blue the Rapper, uh, and he does all these things, like he like will type kind of like with Z's at the end of words. He does it all because he thinks it's funny. But what I, even though I don't find it that funny, I I I I I find it's fat. My friend Nate always uses the word fascinating when he talks to us about our condition, and it's a word I don't always like because I feel like we're like a specimen, you know, or
Right,
like
right, yeah.
you know, like a lab thing. But I can't think of a better word to describe how I react to Blue's presence, because he feels very full of life, you know, like everything's new to him, and he's like trying to experience a lot of stuff, and he absorbs a lot of stuff and learns a lot of stuff. And I just feel like that's so the opposite of who I was when I tried to check out, you know, early from life. And I kind of want to preserve that. So like if he does something, I tend to not be upset about it. You know, like I
Mm-hmm.
just go like, hey, it doesn't hurt anything. I just have
Right,
to, you
right,
know, like no one's really dead or you know, or hurt at the end
right.
of the day.
Well,
Just
it's almost like picking and choosing your battles. Like, I mean,
yeah,
there are
exactly.
bigger things to worry about than the fact that Blue just kind of changed this around. Okay.
Yeah, it's like living with a roommate who doesn't clean the sink after they shave. You're just kind of like, all right, it's not cool, but it's like, you know, just run the water, and you know, and just move on with your day. And like you said, pick your battles.
So
Um,
you have green, you have
yeah,
blue,
yeah, and
you're
fade.
orange,
I'm orange. Yeah,
and then there's fade. And
yeah.
is there one more?
There's another one, but they Black, who's like very specific. Um, as far as I know, has only come out once or twice. Um, so we have, as you can imagine, since we all have our own goals, we all want to do our own things. We don't sleep sometimes. So that's like the one thing like Fight Club I would say probably gets right is the insomnia.
Well,
Um,
yeah, because each altar has an agenda of what they want to get done,
right. And there's
and they're
only
not
so many
like,
hours in the day.
yeah, and they're
Yeah.
not like, oh, I'm here. Well, I'm gonna go to bed now. you
Right.
know.
And usually an indicator for them to like wake up, like, yeah, I could be triggered and force a switch in high pressure or high stress situations. But also me just laying down to go to, because I still battle fatigue from the aneurysm stuff, you know. So I get tired really easy. So like an 8-hour shift is like a marathon to me sometimes, even at
Hmm.
a menial desk job. It can take a lot out of me. So just me being tired and fatigued, I'll come home and pass out, like go to sleep, and then one of them will that'll be a cue. So within a few minutes, one of them is getting up, and then the body is mobile again. Um, and I know this because I have a security camera here for my dog, obviously for our dog, because I want to keep an eye on him when if I go to work. Hold on, he's gonna drink some water. It's loud. Um, so yeah, so like I want to keep an eye on him, and I can say like, hey, Ace, stop doing that, because he'll try to tear the bed apart. Like the other day, he ripped a hole in our sheets just because he has bad anxiety when we're not around. So I had the security camera, so I was like, you know what, I'm gonna start, looking at it and watching it, and I started seeing like them getting up, like our bot, and I'm like, and it's I mean, I imagine it's like watching like, the like those scary movies where you look at a security camera and someone's like possessed. It's a really weird feeling. So I try not to do it that much anymore because it, even though I know it's like our new normal, it still freaks me out. Um, so we went, if we go like 3 days, like recently, like this past weekend, I did the podcast with you guys, and then the last thing I remember, I was like, my head is killing me. And that's an indicator either of a switch or like my body is stressing out or I'm tired because I was obviously up late or I was feeling the mode, as they say on Young Justice. And we checked out. Like, so when at whatever point when I guess switched, someone just logged us out because I don't remember logging out of that stream.
Yeah, all of
Um,
a sudden you just like dipped out, and then
yeah, because
Dave
someone was
was like,
probably like, I don't want to speak or make my presence known, and I don't know what's happening. So they probably just like I went back and watched that moment, and I was like, oh, it looks like they just real subtly just went over and zonked out, like just or exit out. Um, and then they proceeded to stay up that night for the last 2 hours until we had to go to work. So I woke up in the shower, and I'm like, wait a minute, wait, what's going? Like, why am I in the shower? What's happened? Like, what did I finish the podcast? And I'm like, well, what time is it? And I'm like, oh my god, I got to get ready. Yeah, I got to finish getting ready for work. And we had 3 days in a row where, like, every day I was going into work, and my boss is like, what is happening to you? Like, you could see it in my eyes, like my energy. She was like, I'm like, I don't think we've slept in like 2 days. And then the third day, I'm like, I don't think we slept in 3 days. And she could just tell she was like, are you going to be okay? Can you drive home? And I'm like, yeah, we'll have to cross that bridge when we get there, but we want to make it through our shift. And like, because that's the thing is like, we can't expect special treatment. We still have a job to do at our job, which is why we pick something that isn't super stressful or labor inducing, because we want to be able to do the job,
and it's
without,
all with the phone too, so it's like you could still
well,
answer the phone and function.
no, actually, I don't. I deal with guests face to face.
Oh wow, okay, I'm
So
sorry.
so I actually don't. It's like a guest. It's like timeshares. Like we do timeshares.
Okay.
Um, so I interact with guests face to face. So but still, it's only like during certain points of the day. Like we have a wave at like 9 o'clock and a wave at 11. So it's like it's only during bursts, and then the rest of the time I'm just like cleaning kitchens and doing menial stuff, printing out paperwork. So it's like a safe job for someone like me, because even if our cage gets rattled, it's not a hard job for like Blue to step in and do if we need it.
Hmm.
But yeah, so because of that, like I try not to. I don't want to overwhelm myself, and and I just want to get through the day. But so after 3 or 4 days, our body will respond to the lack of sleep, and the way it does that is through black. He will the way Green describes us in a way is like we're all in a car, right? And the whoever's fronting is the driver of the car. But because I can't see what they do and they can't see what I do, um, they're in the trunk of the car when I'm driving, and then when they're driving, they're all sitting in the front seats, and they can alternate a little bit easier, and they can kind of see and be aware of what each other's doing, and I'm in the trunk. But when black appears, there's a car crash. So it's like it shuts us completely down. So it doesn't matter where we are. So Blue was at work when we were at Harley. He took over that job after I didn't get that promotion and I was going through my dark period. He was like, all right, I'm going to watch a bunch of YouTube stuff of Seek's, learn some of his mannerisms, and go into work for him. and that's what he did. And he ended up getting the promotion I didn't get.
Wow.
Yeah, he went and in 4 months became an assistant store manager.
But had he taken over for an entire 4 months?
Yeah, he was there the entire time. So I reverted to only being me at nighttime when he got home from work. And that became our new normal for like a year until we got this job. And then this job was us switching. He was like, "Are you ready to go back to work?" And I was like, "Yes." And he's like, "Okay." So he's like, "I'm gonna leave Harley, and you can have the job now." Because that was his purpose. He was like, I want Seek to be. I want his confidence to come back. I want him to feel like he can be around people again. That he's not, he's not crazy. He's not abnormal. And he let me take this year to readjust. Um, and then so now I work and he's mostly around at nights or something, which is why, like I said, sometimes scheduling stuff can be difficult for me because
Well, yeah, no,
I could
definitely.
miss an appointment. So yeah, so that's kind of how our lives have become now. And so Black will come in, and so Blue was at work, and he was standing at the like at Harley, and then just fell. Like nothing worked. He just fell and hit our head on the ground. And his supervisor at that store came over, and she used to be an EMT, and she also worked with people with similar conditions. So luckily she was the store manager of that store, because
Yeah, right.
he put in a transfer to go to another store so that he could, so he's like, all right, these people know Seek really well, I'm not going to be able to blend in as much. So he put in a transfer to go to another store and became an assistant store manager of that store within
Oh, okay.
within 4 months. And he just shut down. And the way he described it was a car crash. He was like, our car crashed because Black's response to our body being awake was, we need to go back. We need sleep to survive. We're in pain. Like everyone's in pain. So that's, I guess, his role is to make sure we go to sleep, which is also a scary thought, actually, is to have something that is a mechanism in our brain or alter that exists to to make sure we don't stay awake for too long. Like that's very specific. And so it's hard to explore that one because he's only come out once or twice. So it's been hard to and Green knew nothing about him. So Green, and we always lean on Green since he was the first alter to know what our system needs. And Green is like, I don't know who that is. So
Wow.
that's been like a big shock to our system in the past like 7 months. Has
So
been
basically, if you guys stay up for too long, you run the risk of Black taking over and saying, "All right, it's time to go to sleep."
and
Bam.
just shutting us down. Yep.
Wow. That's I don't want to say crazy,
Yeah.
but
No, I know what you mean.
yeah, I mean that's
I've talked to enough people where that's like the natural response is just like,
yeah.
shit, that's fucking crazy.
But I
you
don't
know.
mean crazy as in like you're crazy. I'm just
No,
saying
I
like
know.
that situation that's it's so mind blowing. It's like wow. And the fact that you'd have Alter and Blue that would essentially take the reins over what you guys were doing, and in 4 months got you promotion, and then you would come out at night when
Yeah.
he get home from work, and you're like, oh shit, what am I doing here? And then the only way you guys can communicate is through the whiteboards. So he's telling you like,
Yeah.
yeah, I went to work today. I've been doing a good job. I might get a promotion. Is that kind of how
Yeah,
you guys
pretty much. Or it
communicate?
would come up in therapy too, like, and we also on our phone, we all have like a tab on our phone of on Samsung Notes where we keep notes on our phone. So the notes are something on the phone was we rely the most on because we always have the phone on us. So any one of us can pull out the phone and look at it. But the boards are just here for at home, like, so it's like little stuff like we have a checklist of like who ate lunch, like and who ate breakfast, because there was a time where all of us were just eating. It was one of those things you don't think about. And it was just like, oh yeah, I'm hungry, so I'm going to eat. And then like, oh, someone else hungry. And then we realized we ate like 6 meals in a
Oh
day,
my god!
and you're just
Because
like,
all of you were like,
oh
I'm hungry.
yeah, right. And so we're just reacting to, whoever fronts and whoever does whatever. And so then we're like, oh crap. Okay. So now we need to make this a part of our routine where we check off like, all right, someone ate breakfast today and someone ate lunch today. Um,
Wow.
and so just like little things like that. And that's not like, as that was just in the beginning, we needed to kind of rein that in, but now it's like a little bit less intense. Like we still have the board, but I wouldn't say we use it that much. Like pretty good at knowing like what's missing. Green is pretty good at cooking, so he'll pre-make meals. So like, and he'll put names on them. So it's like it's pretty easy to go like, all right, one of Seek's meals is missing. He ate or something, or one of Blue's meals is missing. So yeah, that's kind of how we run it now for the most part.
Wow,
So there's like little things like
that's
that.
incredible.
Yeah, and there's one thing I think I brought this up on Dave's stream where I was like, there was multiple toothbrushes, and I was like, what the? It's one mouth, guys.
Yeah, it's not
But
like it's different people.
yeah,
It's the same mouth.
yeah, but Blue had to have like a blue toothbrush, so it was like, ah, come on, man. And so like, there's little things like that where sometimes I kind of roll my eyes and go, I don't think this is that necessary. But again, it's just, I don't. I think the main rule we came up with is we don't police each other unless there's something harmful
Right.
happening.
Right.
So it's like, so that's our only rule has been like, hey, look, man, don't hurt anybody, don't hurt yourself. As long as you follow those things, don't hurt Ace. Like, we're all here. We gotta coexist, and we gotta figure this life out at 40 years old. For now I'm 41, but I'm like now we got to figure out this, at this age, when we're already like having enough struggles as it is. So it's
So it's safe to say that your 30s were pretty interesting.
yeah, and I was in LA the whole time. So like throughout all my from 30, from 29 to 39, I was in LA that entire time.
Wow.
So yeah, so that was I would say, and even still like, like not counting the comic book stuff we've done, and it's the one thing my therapist said to me that really made me feel good was that she was like, this doesn't prove how broken or weak you are. This actually proves how strong you and your brain are. You know?
Absolutely. I mean, this shows the amount of organization you can put into,
Yeah.
having to live with each other and function with each other and be able to communicate with each other and coordinate with each other.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
I don't think people realize like there's a lot going on there every single day now. Um,
It's frustrating. It's like that's why we don't really date. Like I work at a place right now, and my coworkers kind of know our situation. Obviously, they have to because Blue came out too. But like it's like, oh, there was someone who works in a different department at work that it's like, oh, I think she's cute, and then my coworker's like, dude, she's super nice, you're super nice, you should go ask her out. And I'm like, how do I do that? Like I
what
go,
if it
I have
evokes an emotion? Then boom.
yeah, because I'm like, I really have to figure that out if we're ever gonna find that level of happiness in this lifetime. I have to really we have to figure that out, like because yeah, I can't risk doing something with somebody and then it triggering something, where an alter comes out or something. And I have to really navigate that. So we're currently talking about that in therapy, where we're bringing that up a lot more about relationships. Because
Yeah,
I don't want to be alone forever.
right. And when you talk about, having multiple or personalities or alters,
Mm.
there's that show that was on Showtime. I think it was called The United States of Terra, where
Oh yeah.
she had that. And so my wife used to watch that show, so I'd watch it with her. And so like some of the instances or some of the situations that you're talking about, yeah, like that show kind of touches on that as well, where like if something emotional or traumatic happens, it causes
The
her
switch.
another alter to come
Mm.
out. And it's like a defense mechanism, like so that alter comes out because they feel like they need to come out and defend or protect you.
Yeah, like
And
if you're feeling attacked, someone might be like if someone's function in your system is to protect, then yeah, they're gonna come out and be like, whoa, 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 Um, but yeah, it's always not that it's not that fast sometimes either. So,
right, right,
um,
right.
but you got to have creative license, visual license when you're making TV and movies. Um,
Hmm.
so that's why like Moon Knight is like, it's like, all right, yeah, this rapid switching isn't like, doesn't always happen like that, but you got to do it for the show because there's an energy to the scene that you got to keep up with. And, you're
Right.
doing fight scenes too. So it's interesting. I thought, so doing it, I have a lot more respect for people who do Doom Patrol, and the show you're just talking about with Tara and Moon Knight. It's like, that's a hard topic to navigate while still having visual and creative movie license to tweak things.
Well, before we go, I wanted to ask you the Venom blog. Can you
Yeah.
talk? I at least want to talk about that real quick. I mean,
Yes.
So describe the Venom vlog to anyone who hasn't seen your channel.
It's real simple. It's, I use YouTube as an outlet to, like, talk, like, when, especially after speech therapy, I just wanted to get better at communicating. And luckily that worked out, because in the end I needed to learn how to communicate with myself. So,
Right, right, right.
so the Venom vlog is, I'm just a big Tom Hardy fan. I love all of his work. He's
Mm-hmm.
probably my favorite actor. And so, like, from Bane to Venom, and everything in between, Mad Max and Warrior, and all the stuff he's been in.
Well, he
So
was great in Mad Max. I love that
he's
movie.
so awesome. Yeah, and he's a great guy. I met him a few times. He's fantastic, um and he's very down to earth. And so I was like, oh, he's gonna play Venom. That's cool. I like that character. I'm not a encyclopedia of the character like I am some other, like Green Lantern, for example.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm like, yeah, but I think this will be. I was looking for a niche on my channel. I was doing toy reviews, and that was getting too expensive because I wasn't making any money. And I'm like sinking into all these toys, and so I'm like, yeah, I got to do something that's a little bit more fiscally responsible.
Yeah.
So I'm like, okay, well, I have a lot of these comics, and they go on sale on Comixology a lot, so I can buy ones for real cheap when they go on sale, and I can do a show on Venom, and we'll just follow the movie. So it's just following movie news. And so that's what started the show. And then that turned out to be the thing. After all the stuff, all the darts I threw at the dartboard of trying to do things on this channel that never worked, Venom was the thing that clicked. And people were just like, yeah, we want more. We want more. We want to meet more people that talk about Venom. And so that's what started the show. And that's all it is. We're 800 and something episodes later now,
Wow.
over the last 5 years. And we just cover the movies and dip into the comic books, whenever there's no movie news, which right now, obviously there's zero movie news. So
Well,
so
yeah,
we're gonna,
strike.
yeah, yeah. So we're gonna get into a lot more comics coming up, and
But
then the Spider-Man 2 video game. So it's just a love. It's a love letter to Venom is what I call it. We're trying to hit 1,000 episodes.
that's awesome, man. You guys,
Yeah,
if you haven't checked out the Venom vlog, definitely check it out. Subscribe over on YouTube. Um, I just the fact, and I just want to say this too, that the fact that all the coordination, all of the communication, and that you've had to learn how to do, I think is it's tremendous. I can't imagine trying to rebuild your own life, and then all of a sudden having to do that with four others that are all within you. I mean, that's a lot, and it's incredible that you've been able to do all this, with help, but mainly by
yeah,
yourself.
yeah. A lot of help. I mean, having patient friends and a good therapist and good doctors. It's like you get there. It's like it's one of those situations like the movie Signs, where you realize the reason you leave half drunk glass of water everywhere is because that's what kills the aliens. You're like, yeah,
Yeah.
it's one of those things where it's like, oh, all these things I've done, like meditation to deal with some of the pain I'm in, all these things I've done over the years and learned over the years, like much like the journals that ended up helping me, see a glimpse of a life that I don't remember. Everything kind of works towards, everything's for something else. Everything knocks over the next domino. And I think because I was working on communication already, and working on, trying to find like a peace in myself, in through all my rage and frustration, like, I think because I was already on that journey, this, although a massive wrinkle and disruption of that journey, the steps I was already taking still helped. So, and honestly, I think I got really lucky by everyone else in the system also being as productive as I am. So it's like it's made things easier. And then, like I said, sometimes you just got to let go. And I think that's the biggest thing I've been working on is when something happens that I don't agree with, I have to look at it and go, did anyone get hurt? Is it fine? Does it,
Hmm.
you know, no? Okay, then just let it go. Let them live their life too. And it's a lot. It's frustrating, and I'll be honest. A lot of it people don't see. I try to keep things mostly positive, even when I open up about stuff on social media. I still try to keep things positive or make jokes, like when I'm in Dave's stream. I just try to keep things light because I don't want people to look at me and be like, "Oh yeah, like that's how that condition is." Like I like when people look at me and go, "Dude, you're funny and smart, and
Hmm.
you seem collected." And I'm like, "Well, good. That means then I'm changing your view of what this diagnosis is." And that's why the Venom vlog is like, we just talk about Venom, and I don't really go into my personal health stuff, because I'm like, I see people who have this condition and make, TikToks or YouTube videos, and their whole channels about having this condition. And I'm
Hmm.
like, I never did that with aneurysms, and I'm not going to start here with this.
Right,
You know,
right.
if it comes up, that's great, you know, in conversation and here from here and there, but I'm not going to dedicate a whole channel to it because my way of getting rid of stigma is by showing you like, well, I'm still a comic book fan, you know, so like I can still have normal comic book
Yeah,
conversations and rage
exactly.
out about comic book, you know, stuff. So yeah, so I think that to me is how I normalize people's perception of stuff.
Wow. Thank you so much for coming on here and sharing that incredible story. I mean, and it's ongoing. It's not like it's a story that happened and went away.
Yeah.
Is there any chance that you think, or do you think is there even a possibility that the old Seek will eventually be one of the personalities, one of the alters?
From what we understand, identities don't die. Like so, at least that's how we understand it through what we've learned in therapy was like he may have been the one who took the blast from the aneurysm, um, but but it's possible. In fact, even Blue at one point was like, you know, I want to go find him, you know, and it's just like, well, our brain is just darkness. We don't have visual memories from the aneurysm, so when we close our eyes, it's just pitch black. I don't remember what people's faces are every time I see them. I usually commit people to memory by their voice, or like at work, something as simple as their footsteps.
Hmm.
So like if I hear footsteps coming, I'm like, oh, I know who that is. Or like not always, but I can make a good guess. I've been wrong a couple times, but voices are the big thing. So if I usually say hey to everybody, so they'll say, hey, how's it going? Back to me, and then I go, oh, okay, I can now figure out who you are. But luckily, I work at a job where everyone wears name tags too, so that helps me
That helps. Yeah.
a lot. Yeah,
That makes it a little easier.
which is why I stick to jobs like that too, because I'm like, yeah, if we wear name tags here, okay, cool, that makes my job easier. So it's you know, you do what you can. Like you know, I'm not a very faith based person, although I mentioned faith a few times in this, but like I always like that phrase, even though it used to frustrate me, but it was one of those phrases that I eventually warmed up to, which is like God never gives you more than you can handle.
Hmm.
And although I wish he would realize I hit my limits sometimes, uh I guess he has a higher, you know, perception of me than I have of myself. So it's you know it's nice that I'm like, don't, you know, just don't let it overwhelm you. So you just take it day to day, and everyone has problems. So what I like about having that perspective is that I don't see myself as anything special. Like I I have people at work complain about things that, you know, I had one friend go like, dude, who you're gonna listen to her complain about that when you go through this and this? And I'm like, but dude, you don't compare. You know, it's like, well,
Hmm.
this isn't a contest of like who deals with the most bullshit. We all deal with bullshit. And so it's not a contest. And even if it were, I would not be in the lead by any means. Everyone's going through something. So as long as I, you know, keep that, I feel like it at least keeps me level, you know, for the most part. But yeah, I know, and I'm glad. I mean, thanks for doing this. It's been a long time since I think since Dan's podcast, and maybe Matt Dwyer's, that I've spent the whole podcast talking about this stuff. It's been a while, so thanks for making me feel comfortable enough to share that with you. Like that, honestly, that should say a lot about how I feel about you already, even though we're kind of new.
Yeah.
I don't always trust people with stuff, so yeah, thank you for giving me a chance to trust and, you know, and become a friend of yours.
Of course, and thank you for coming on here. I mean, like I said, just hearing part of your story on Dave's stream, I thought I was like, man, I would love to hear more of this and more about this and in depth talk about this. And at the time, I wasn't doing, podcast style shows on this channel, and then I reached a point where I said, you know what, I can only talk about movie news for so much, like, for so long. I need to change it up, and so
Yeah.
I've been starting to do a lot more of these, and I'm really enjoying it because it just brings a lot more to your life, and you learn a lot more about people, and you learn a lot more about yourself, and it's just it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, and I got to have you on the Parasite podcast now. So
There you go. See,
yeah,
it goes both ways.
yeah, there you go.
But Seek, like I said, thank you so much for coming on here. I really appreciate you taking the time to tell us your story. Incredible, to say the least. I think it's an incredible story, and that it's still going to this day. Um, it's amazing what you're able to accomplish, and I just want to say thank you for coming on here. If you guys haven't done so yet, make sure you check out the Venom vlog over on YouTube. Subscribe and smash like button for his channel as well.
Yeah, thank you. And thanks again for having me, man. It was a blast.
Awesome. Guys, make sure you smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, and hit that bell notification button so you're always notified of any new content the channel puts out. You'll find this podcast on Spotify a little bit later tonight. Well, if you're on Spotify, then you'll already be there. And then, of course, we have the show will also be on YouTube Music under YouTube Podcasts. So definitely check us out there. Rate the podcast, rate the show, leave a comment in the comment section below. Consider becoming a Patreon and join them. Become a member to help support the channel. So, like I said, guys, thank you so much, Siike. Thank you for coming on here. This was a lot of fun. We'll do it again.
Heck yeah.
And next time, we'll talk more about all the other shit
That's cool.
that we love. Yeah.
Yeah, of
but
course.
I wanted
No.
to have this conversation and have it focused on you because I just thought the story was so incredible that I just really wanted to hear it straight
Well,
from
thanks.
you. So
Yeah, it means a lot. Thanks for giving me like I said, for helping me build trust. It's awesome. I was glad I talked to you today.
awesome, guys. I'll be live again. What is today? Well, I actually won't be on next Monday because I'll be out of town. But I will let you guys know. I am going to be probably back on Wednesday night when I interview Ryan Zieverfett, which we were going to do that on Wednesday, but he had to cancel. So that's why I called Siike and said, hey, let's do it on Thursday. And here we are. So, guys, thank you very much for tuning in. Check out the Venom vlog, and we will see you guys next time. Peace!